Well, yeah, but I still prefer gallery view so I can see how people
Yes,
are.
you can actually change to gallery view and still be spotlighted.
Yeah, I know.
So it just means for that people will see that you're the speaker. But otherwise, if I leave it, it's fine because it's a discussion. It'll automatically go to whoever's talking.
Yeah.
So so anyway, so hi guys, nice to see some of you still coming back this evening.
Even though it shut down before this.
Yeah, well, we had to, you know, otherwise you're going to lose your, you won't, you know, would have like one person in the closing. So I thought we'll do it that way, like the Olympics, you know. So Randall's going to be just answering questions on based on the video that he put up on Friday evening, and we'll probably start with the questions that are already in the Q&A. Unless Randall, did you want any preamble?
Just to say that I'm hoping this will be as much of a discussion as a one-way monologue. So I hope people know how to mute themselves and come in. And if you turn your videos on and you wave a hand, I'll try and pick you up. There's not a lot of us in here at the moment. Or you can raise an electronic hand if you've got something. We can use chat as well, but I'm not very good at managing chat while I'm talking. But that is a possibility. But we'll work from there. So yeah, do you want to pose the question? Mary, my wife, will be joining us in a minute, but we've just got a phone call, so we're multitasking as a married couple at the moment.
No, really
Juliet,
good.
do you want to?
Yeah, so I'll just raise the first question that was on your sessions, which was, how does GDPR work with the LA, as we're not service users? Should they still be contacting us?
Right. I think they should, because I think they think all children are their service users. If you read the legislation that they're always quoting, it really is about children they are looking after. But it's been extended in people's minds to all children. So now in Wales, we've just had a consultation finish on building up a database on, it was originally announced in the context of home education. And in that context, it was announced that it was happening for home educated children and other children, borrow the English phrase, not in school. But to try and get around the data protection issues, I think they've now expanded it to be a database in every local authority on every school age child. They've tried to keep it pretty narrow, but if you read the actual documents they're thinking of voting on, it actually says that they want information including the name and contact details of anybody who looks after the child, without specifying what that means. So that could be grandparents, that could be anybody who babysits, and so on. So they obviously think they can work around any data protection issues on those grounds. On the other hand, though, you have got the situation in Scotland where, when it was taken by the lead group was Christian Institute, but Scottish Home Ed Forums, certainly Alison Pruce worked with the Christian Institute on that and took it to the High Court, the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court ruled that their data collection and sharing foundation was bad, wasn't legal. And for 18 months or so, the Scottish government tried to find a way around it, and they couldn't. So you've kind of got this impression that is lodged in many local authority employers and in the DFE and other education departments that they've got a right to know about every child. And we have a little bit of evidence on our side that they haven't. And it will be up to the courts to decide in the end which is right. So my feeling is data protection strongly limits what they can do, and the point that we are not, that home educators are not service users in that sense, is a valid one, but they obviously don't think it is. So that's my general summary of that. I don't know if anybody wants to come in on that.
So we're talking about GDPR and the local authority. If we're not service users, how do they, you know, should they still be contacting us? And Julie Spriddle, I know you've got lots of thoughts on around local authorities and what they should and shouldn't be doing. I don't know if you want to jump in there.
I mean, I'm not exactly sure what I can or can't add to that. I mean, GDPR, the problem with GDPR, or the Data Protection Act 2018, which is the one that replaces it, is most of this is untested in court. I mean, when I did the training, because it was mandatory training at work on GDPR, and one of the things the trainer was at pains to sort of push home is that until it's been tested in the courts, a lot of it is open to interpretation. Now, there are certain things which are definitely breaches which the ICO would investigate and would take very seriously, but there are a lot of grey areas to do with exemptions, which the local authority can call on, which would allow them. So if they're providing a public service, or if it's considered to be something which is a safeguarding issue, or it's something that's required for you to do your job, there are a series of exemptions. You would have to go and look at the act to get the exact details, but there are a series of exemptions that they can quote, that they can say, well, we needed to do this because otherwise X, Y, and Z. And I would guess that's what they're going to be relying on to get around this, is that they can say, well, there's obviously a safeguarding issue, which is why you would then get people like Anton Hongfield saying that all children at home who are not overseen by teachers and are not in school are vulnerable, and how do we know what's going on? And all of that gets played up in people's mind because they're preparing for that kind of argument. That would be my guess. Sorry, I've got a cat's incursion happening here. He's gone.
That's all right. Yeah, just to come back, in Wales, Sally Holland, the Children's Commissioner, I think not in public, but things were coming through in what she wrote and things, was suggesting that they'd have to go for primary legislation rather than secondary legislation, because under the British data protection laws and human rights things, a local authority can't bring something in, some certain things in, under secondary legislation unless it's spelt out in primary legislation. So I think that's the reason why in Wales the database thing is not going through as guidance, which is secondary level stuff. It's going through as primary legislation, or they're intending to put it through as primary legislation to try and circumvent some of the restrictions that law does, that Julie was hinting at there. It's quite complicated, and but that's why David Wolf's legal opinion on the Welsh situation is helpful. And I do know that all we've got there is a summary, because David Wolf didn't want to spill all the beans towards the Welsh government, so they could find their any workarounds. He wanted to keep that for us, hold that back, so that they've got as much power to their elbow as possible. So it is a contested area, what is and isn't allowed under GDPR and other data protections.
Yeah, I think.
Anybody?
Well, what I
Go,
wanted
Julie.
to add to that is that I think what we see is government, or maybe not government so much, but the officials are constantly wanting to come into an area where they're not allowed and feeling like they have the right to. So they try and change the guidance or the legislation, but then it gets blocked because actually they are basically, overstepping. And the law protects us at the moment from that overstepping. So they keep trying to chip from this side or from that side, trying to find a weak spot or where we won't have our defenses up, and perhaps waiting till we don't notice or slipping it through. So I think that's the danger that we face.
Yeah.
It's like we must not give up on the fight. That's what it is.
I think we can't tackle them further. So is there anybody who's got another question, or shall we go to one of the store ones that are in stock at the moment? Wave a hand, electronic hand, if you've got a question. Julia, next question then, please.
Okay, so this one, Fiona Nicholson actually asked, she said, do you think home ed numbers will go up, as in parents actually deregistering, as opposed to not wanting to send children back till it's safe? So after the pandemic, what do you expect? Do you think there will be people who want to actually deregister their children from school?
Right. I hope most of you here watched my video presentation in which I quoted a piece of research, self-selecting research amongst a particular peer group of people, so might not be a national figure, but I was pleasantly surprised when they reported nearly 25% of parents saying that they would continue to home educate after lockdown finishes and children go back to school.
It wasn't a huge sample.
It wasn't a huge sample.
2,000.
2,000, and as I say, from a group. Now, even if only 10% knew that, that will send shivers down a lot of people's spines in government and in those areas. I think it is likely that there'll be a lot of people, again, I pointed out some of the things, people saying, I've got a brand new relationship with my child since they're not going to school. A daughter saying to her mum, Mum, I don't have to worry about school anymore. I am really hopeful that people now have suddenly got hold of something they thought was beyond them. And yet it's not homeschooling, it's not home education. At the moment, they're doing pandemic schooling. They're doing emergency schooling at home. But the reports that I've seen of people saying, this has done our family a lot of good, it's bonded us together, I think is brilliant. And I hope there will be a significant rise. But of course, be prepared. We used to be a small, insignificant group. According to the Times, there's 20,000 home educated children meant to be taking GCSEs this summer. So how, that's significant. What they're saying, 60,000 home educated children. If that goes up by another 10–15% as a result of the pandemic, there's going to be people who are saying, hang on, I'm not sure I like this. I'm bringing out the lobbying even more. So I think there will be some. I'm not predicting what it is. I'm cautious it'll be the 25%, because a lot of parents are really struggling. And the other side of the coin, of course, is once you get through all this and you're a bit worse off for money, then actually sending the kids back to school will be very attractive. But I do think this whole pandemic has actually brought out in the conversations how much schools are actually a child-minding service to enable people to be economically contributing. And that's why they want the schools back. They want to get the economy going, and they want to get the schools back because they know if they don't get the schools back, the workforce can't go back to work. So it's all that area. That's my feeling. Yes, a small rise, but not a massive one like 25%. Julie, I can see you waving a hand.
I am waving my hand. I just wanted to sort of comment that to counter that, if you get 10% of people who decide to home educate as a result of this, what I'm worried about is the remaining 90%, the ones who found home educating as they think it is, or homeschooling, or what I prefer to call lockdown learning is actually home education.
That's another good
And
term.
they've got a very negative view of everything to do with it. So to give an example, I've been working today, which means that I've been interacting with my colleagues virtually, obviously, but I've been working today. And once you go on to the instant messaging, where they're chattering amongst themselves, and they're all can't wait until the schools are open. And they're talking about children as young as 3 years old, who they think desperately need to be in school, and they can't understand why it's taking so long, and how it's awful, and they hate every minute of it. And quite literally, it's unrelenting. It just carries on. And these are not uneducated people. These are professionals. These are people who do the same thing that I do for a living. So they work in IT. They actually should have all of the skills necessary to provide for their children and to stimulate their children, but they're really, really struggling, and they are hating every single minute of it. Now, your problem is that if an awful lot of people are hating every single minute of it, and they think that this is what home education is like, then if the government or anybody else decides to up the pressure even more, then they could have a large portion of your normal people who actually agree with them that it's awful, that it's terrible, that their children hated it, that the parents hated it, that it didn't do any good, and that children definitely need to be in school. So I just wanted to put that I have definitely come across people who you would think are perfectly capable, but they're hating it. And as far as they're concerned, it's a terrible experience for them and their children.
Thank you. I want to back that up, but from a different source in some ways. Over the last couple of years, I've read quite a lot on the TES website, used to be the Times Educational Supplement. Since lockdown, I've been looking at it towards the end of every day, just to see what's being said. And one of the surprising things is the same divide has happened in teachers. Some of them have said, this is really great. One mum who teaches in Edinburgh Blind School has a daughter with special needs, and she says, it's been great for my daughter at home, because she's been learning in an environment that she wouldn't have in school, and she's been learning a lot more, and she could really see the value of it. Some teachers are actually saying, teaching kids online, I'm getting more of a relationship with them. One article by a teacher said, well, we've got a small number of children, we decided not to do proper lessons, and I'm spending my afternoons with 3 or 4 on the school allotment, and they're learning a lot. You know, all the home education methods, really, and they're really responding to it. And there's good things coming out in teachers, but then you get the other side of the arguments, articles by people who are saying, I can't handle teaching my own children. It's driving me silly. I can't do it. And that side as well is there. So there is that divide, and I think Julie's right that there won't be much middle ground in parents who are home educated. They'll either love it or hate it. They'll want to get back to having their own lives back rather than bonding with their family. But there is good news that some of them are saying, yeah, this is good. I like it, and I don't want to lose it. I don't know. It's certainly going to continue. I don't see the schools being fully functional for many months. I don't think they'll be fully functional by the end of the year, for example. Juliet?
I just wanted to share, so my friend Mary, that you've met her, I think. So she's gone back into teaching, and there's the children that are at the school at the moment. She was saying they're not allowed to have any blocks, any like manipulatives, any cubes, any soft toys or anything. Basically, they're only allowed to have something like a pencil and a book, and it's very austere because of, you know, not to prevent cross infection. So, you know, there's the other side of that, is like where to expect children to go back into that environment is actually almost abusive in itself, in that these children actually can't have anything approaching like a normal, a good education under those circumstances.
Yeah. Anybody, any comments? Laura is waving a hand. Unmute yourself.
I've just got a question, if it's okay to change the subject slightly.
Yeah.
I am brand new to this, and we're I guess we haven't even got a community around us yet. So I was wondering, and it's a kind of a question to everybody, if you know of any local authorities or areas that are especially you know, pro home ed. Are there any, does that exist, any local authorities in the whole of the UK that are pro home ed?
Juliet's nodding. She's probably better to answer that one than me.
Yes, there definitely are a few. And certainly in ours, we have a good situation. So for the last few, I'm going to use the word generations, but we've, you know, for the last sort of 3-4 generations of local authority officers, there've been some of us from our home ed community who have gone and met regularly with the local authority, basically told them how it is, told them how they should expect it to be, and had discussions on the importance of mutual trust and respect in the relationships with home educators. And that has actually, so the culture now in the department is a positive one. So that when they employ a new person, that culture is continuing, and we still continue to work well with them. Now, what is interesting is I'm actually not theoretically on their books at all. So they've never actually met my children or abused that relationship, because we've gone into it from a point of view, it's like, you know, we're coming for, this is what the law says, and I don't actually have to engage, but I'm choosing to, but not for this reason, but to make sure things work well. And the other thing that actually helped is, so if you are going to approach your local authority and try and work with them, I think it's good if you have that your representatives are people who are at least a bit articulate and come across confidently and are familiar with the law and what, you know, how, you know, the legal remit of the local authority, and knowing your own position in the law. You need to have that confidence. And in our case, what worked well is the fact that I have a social work background and my friend has a teaching background, so they could hardly argue with it. So if you do want to work with your local authority, I think it's possible, but you have to choose quite wisely who goes to make those representations, and it is possible. So I know Hampshire, I think, is also a fairly good one. There are a few and so like within London, you'll get some that are better than others and some that are awful. So you need, the best way is to sort of find out from people who live in the area. If you're considering moving or anything like that, okay, then you know, we can tell you Coventry, you'll be fine. great community in Coventry and a positive relationship with the local authority, but there are others. So you can always go and ask on the groups and the forums, and people will tell you what's happening in their areas.
As well, I mentioned it this morning, I mentioned it in my presentation. Anybody in Scotland, there is the Home Truths report there that details things up there, but it can very much be a lottery. You know, it's good that what Juliet said, that a local authority is saying this is our culture towards home education, so anybody employed gets inducted into that culture. But that's not the case. Following Badman, Lancashire did a lot of work with their local authority and built up a very good relationship with one particular member of staff. But I think then she went on sick leave, and it all began to fall apart. And I think that it's not there anymore. So it is much better for those who have the time and the energy to work with a local authority, to do it and try and get something written and down that changes the culture, rather than just rely on a one-to-one relationship.
Yeah, I heard you saying about Labour being anti-home ed. Would you say that the Green Party or the Dems are any more pro-home ed?
The Green Party, and I will say this, and knowing that somebody there here is very much involved in it, is the only party with a specific policy that's pro-home education.
Okay. But that wouldn't necessarily trickle down. It wouldn't filter down just because we've got an MP. Say I did have a Green MP here. Wouldn't necessarily, what I've heard is that it kind of
let the person who's associated with the Green Party comment.
Yeah.
Julie, unmute yourself.
Thank you, Randall. I was actually involved. I am a Green Party member. I'm a local officer for the Green Party here in Coventry. I sit on the Education Policy Working Group, such as it is. I mean, it's not actually a very busy group and hasn't done anything for a couple of years, actually, since I think Home Educators took it over. We kind of invaded and we took over the entire group, and then it kind of dwindled out after that. I think maybe we were too radical, I don't know. But anyway, so the Green Party, we have a policy. It's not the policy we were aiming to get, but it was the policy we could get past. So what you've got to realize is in the Green Party, and it'll be the same in any party, you will have a good mix of people who've got all sorts of ideas, just like in any other field. And so most of the people who you are attempting to persuade that your policy is a good policy, sadly, don't know very much about home education. They only know what the papers tell them. They're completely uninformed. So you have to bear that in mind. Now, the vast majority of members know nothing. So they've got no real preconceived idea. But the vast majority of people from outside of home education, out of our community such as it is, would say to you, if you said, oh, I'm thinking about not sending my child to school, they go, what? You've got to send your child to school. It's the law. You can't not go to school, no, and so on and so forth. So you've got to get past that first. It's not necessarily that they are completely against it as individuals. It's just they've never really thought about it. And that certainly is what we found when we were talking to members. Now, my personal feeling, and I've said this before online, is that I think that we as home educators should be effectively infiltrating party politics. I think you should start at the local level, because local authorities are run by the council. The council is made up of councillors. Councillors are elected from local parties, and they should, I must admit, not necessarily with the Labour Party, they've got an interesting approach, but they should be drawn from local members. So if you join your local party and you become an active member and you turn up to socials, you know, go to any speeches, go to demonstrations or whatever that they're putting on, and then you get to know people, bring your children if it's appropriate, and just gradually talk to people, and they would actually come to know that home educators are not something to be scared of. And over a period of time, remembering that your counsellors are drawn from these people, you don't necessarily have to become a counsellor yourself, but you're interacting with them, which means that they will come to know that you are normal, that your children are normal, that there are lots of people out there like you who are just normal, and gradually there will be sympathy that will come towards you of these things. But sadly, I'm afraid you will always come across people who are going to be the haters, if you like, whatever you go into and whatever walk of life or whichever party. The thing you have to make sure is that your voice is louder, that it's more persuasive, more reasonable, and that it's not necessarily the person that you're talking to that you're trying to win over. It's anybody else who's listening who's more likely to be able to be reasoned with, rather than the person that's having a rant.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and that goes anyway. Even just having contact with your own local MP, the more contact you have with your councillors and your MP, the more they get to know you as a person, rather than as a just you know, somebody who's part of a lobby group. So yeah, try and build up a relationship either through the party or otherwise.
I think it helps if you're going to do that, if you can also make sensible, reasonable citizen sort of comments on a range of issues, not just on home education, so that they know you are a bona fide citizen, not just somebody with a bee in the bonnet about home ed.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that, and it would go for any party affiliation. I mean, I can talk for the Green Party as in personal experience, but it would be any political party and any of the groups that are currently campaigning against home education. So say you take the humanists, for example. There are an awful lot of humanists which, if they actually thought about it, for example, would be horrified about the attitude that's taken towards home education, because it actually goes against everything they believe in if you actually go looking at it. I'm not a humanist, by the way, but I'm saying is that the same thing, it can apply even there where you've got the people in charge are campaigning against home education actively because they seem to, I don't know, they've got it all caught up with being anti-religion or something. But you've got to go trying to bear in mind it's not the people at the front, the people who are doing the shouting, that you're actually trying to persuade. What you're trying to do is to get the people who are standing to one side and listening. They're the ones whose ear you will catch and who you may be able to sway to your own opinion.
All right, anybody else want to come in on that? Any other questions? Wave a hand, electronic hand.
Just with who is here tonight, is there anyone else who has had really good experiences with their local authority?
Right. Anybody done anything with their local authority besides Juliet? Well, we did. I forget when it was, about 2017 or so. It was brought to our attention, not only did Shropshire have a bad policy, they'd had a very good HE advisor who was a retired headmaster, who'd built up a lot of good relationships with the HE community. And then he retired, and it went through a very choppy period. And people he'd been saying, oh, you know what's going on, because they wouldn't accept visits, they were now putting them on the Children Missing Education register. And the policy was really bad. So we could have written, well, we knew one mum who didn't make an official complaint, but it was just being brushed off. So we went to our local councillor, talked to her, and then she put us in touch with the two most relevant councillors. And we had a meeting with them and with their lead staff. They agreed to review their policy. It was terrible, the new review. I must admit, I marked it a bit like a GCSE paper. I made the comment, I don't know who's written this, but they wouldn't get a C grade in law. And everything went quiet. And then 6 months, 8 months later, I discovered a brand new policy on their website, and it got about 8 out of 10 in my book. It was a lot better than it was, but the staff didn't want to build up a relationship. It didn't go far enough, but it got a little bit of respect. I know that in Birmingham, after the Kaya Ishak thing case, and Birmingham was in a mess. I don't know where it is now, but the reports I was getting was there was a lot of good progress being made between the home educating community and Birmingham. And where it's gone since, but they had got such bad marks as the city council there, they were having to go right back, and the home educating community were having good input. It really is local people to local situations that you've got, but you've got to be out of the time. And a lot of home educating parents have got far more important things to do than take on the local authority. That's why a long in the tooth person like me feels I can give some time to it, because our kids are grown up. But it's a freedom that is worth protecting for our grandchildren and their children and all you and your kids and their kids. So it is something that is, I feel it's worth investing time in.
Randall, I've got another question that came up on the app, which is, what are the most important things I need to be aware of as a relatively new home ed mom? And I'm assuming that means in relation to the political situation.
Right. Do you want to, shall I?
Yeah, well, just be aware that there's generally a climate of hostility towards home ed. It varies from local authority to authority, but in government, the general attitude over different flavours of government has not been positive. So just to conduct yourself wisely and to read as much as you can, even if it's just dipping into the educational news every now and again, just to keep aware of what's being said and what's going on. If possible, to plug into some home education news feed that will tell you if there's a consultation coming up, so that you, even if you can't answer it yourself or don't feel you've got the time or the know-how to answer it, at least you're aware of what the issue is being consulted on. And to keep your ear to the ground, talk to other home educators in your area. I don't know if this person is someone from England or Wales or Scotland, but there are issues different for each country, aren't there?
Yeah.
So,
it is keep in touch with your local community, find out who the key voices in your area, regionally, England, Wales, Scotland, Northern Ireland, Isle of Man, find out who the key voices are from the home educating community. You might not agree with all they say, but they are a good source of information. And also find the local people and keep you here on the ground. The best people to tell you what the local authority is like are the people who are having to deal with them, who've already had dealings with them locally. In Shropshire, I asked that 18 months ago, one or two parents, and the best bit of feedback I got, their paperwork is atrocious, but when the person comes and sees you, they're lovely. So, you know, the paperwork was terrible, but the actual...
More intimidating than the visit.
Yeah, the visit wasn't the issue. So if you know that, that does help you. But you get met with that letter, and it's really there.
But the visit isn't mandatory, is it?
No.
You know, you don't have to.
No,
have
you
the
don't have
visit.
to have it.
That should be said as well.
Yeah. You
Yeah.
will often find, what I think I'm saying is you often find that the initial approaches and things are really bad because it's coming from this we're in authority over you position, which is the mentality in a lot of education departments. But sometimes you'll find that the bark is a lot worse than actually meeting the person. But quite often, the management side of the staff have no clue about home education, about why parents do it. They just come from educational welfare background, so any child not in school is a problem.
Or potentially in danger.
Yeah, and more as it gets talked up in danger. Yes, Julia?
Yeah. I just want to add to that, something we see on the groups that we're on a lot is where people don't actually go and read the guidelines and the law for themselves. And they're relying on other people to tell, you know, they kind of have heard bits and pieces, but they don't actually know their own standing in the law. And I think that it's so important to know that for yourself so that you can counteract any unreasonable demands from a local authority. And I know, Julie, you've probably got the same bugbear where, you know, you hear people asking, you know, they've been home educating, but they're throwing terms around that they have no idea what they mean either. And but they haven't gone and done the reading for themselves. And that, I think, is a problem to all of us. I see there is a hand up, by the way, Randall, for Alison.
Sorry, I was just going to say, if a person fairly new to home ed feels unconfident in, you know, responding to a query from the authority, then it's good to do their homework properly and also to run it past a more experienced home educator and say, am I saying the right sort of thing? Have I said anything stupid here? Is there anything else you would add? And just sort of get a bit of a feel for what is an appropriate thing to say that would suffice to reassure them that you're doing something, but not tell them a load of stuff you don't need to tell them.
Just to add, there are also a lot of local authorities who ask for things they're not legally allowed to or entitled to ask for, and so you need to know. You need to be aware of that, so that because when they often sort of abuse that ignorance of the home educating parent, and then press for more and press for more. Sometimes, you know, they say, oh, we're going to check up on you every month. I've heard of some, we're going to check on you every week. So, and if the parent doesn't know that that's not acceptable, that, you know, and then once you've conceded that bit of ground, it's very hard to then fight it back again to where it should be. Do you want to go to the next question, Randall?
If nobody else wants to come on, let's go for the next one, Julia.
It's Alison Stewart.
You're right.
Alison?
Unmute yourself, Alison. Can't hear you. Can't hear you.
Okay, I've unmuted her. Where are you, Alison?
Right, she's there. I can see her on my screen. Shout, please.
We can't hear her.
Still can't hear.
Can't hear you, Alison.
She's unmuted.
Yeah, it might be a microphone problem. Do you want to put your question in the chat, Alison? Sometimes it's a microphone problem.
Yeah.
So I'm lowering her hand, but I think she's typing it in the chat. So we have a couple of things in the chat. It's not really questions, though. It's more just comments. Anyone else
We're
want to
waiting
ask
for this
something while we're
question, you
waiting?
see. I'll just answer one of them.
Oh,
Just
she's
done it, right.
yeah. She said
I was under the, go on then.
No,
Read
I'll leave it. I'll leave it to you. I'll mute myself.
I was under the impression that it was best not to have a home visit, but to send a report. Quite often that's the case, but it does depend on the local area. As I say, here in Shropshire, for 10 years, there was a really helpful home ed advisor, and he had a really good relationship with a lot of the home educators, and that was fine. And in some areas, especially where, as Juliet was saying earlier, where people have done the work, then if you feel happy with it, do it. Talk to them. That's not a major issue. But if you feel that they're hostile and not going to listen, well, then you are better to offer them a report. But at the same time, if it's your first one, find somebody else who's a bit longer in the tooth to have a look at it before you send it in, because I think one of the big temptations is, if you send in a report, I've seen 2 or 3 where people want to say too much. And actually the art sometimes is just to say enough. Enough to say, we've got a plan, we've got an objective, and we're getting there. Where I think, especially newer home educators want to justify themselves down to every last pencil mark and everything else. So it's that balance. If you know you're in a good area where they'll have that, that's fine. It keeps conversation going. And in the end, you can begin to feed back into the local authority's mindset, which is good. But there's always the thing is the staff member you've got to know moves on and somebody else comes in who isn't as positive. So that's another possibility. But yeah, you've got to judge it locally, I would say. Anybody else want to come in?
I think that you're quite right, Randall. It is a case of satisfying the law and no more, really, if you can. It's to keep that line drawn so that the local authority understand, that's where the line is. And when you give more than you need to or required to by law, sometimes that person on the other side will then try and take even more. And it's just about keeping that line, making them aware where the line is, and holding them to what they're legally limited to. Because these are little freedoms. They're tiny little freedoms sometimes, and we can't afford to give anything more right now. We've got to keep that line. Does anybody else have a question for Randall? Or anyone want to talk about something about the political situation, or raise an issue? Got any ideas about how we handle the things we're seeing politically in the country?
No. No.
So quiet out there.
It's the end of a long weekend, Julia.
It is. But as long as what we're sharing is helpful, and this is your opportunity, you've come along here for a reason, I'm sure. So hopefully, the thing is, have you had the answers?
Anybody who hasn't spoken yet wants to come in? Unmute yourself. No. Just to say then, this afternoon, one of the things that came up was actually understanding what's going on and trying to find collectively as the home education community a way of making our case much clearer. As has already been mentioned, there are certain lobby groups who, for various reasons, ideological mainly, don't like home education. They believe in the state setting the agenda for what children must learn, and they think they can influence that easier than influence independent parents. And they're very strong lobby. And the question was coming up: can we do anything? And I certainly floated. Well, I floated the idea that what we really need is for those of us in the home education community who are in influential positions, just with voices. You don't have to be a member of an organisation, but just people with voices. We need to begin talking to one another a lot more and sharing our thinking of what the real issues are, because I think since Lord Surley came along, I haven't, under Badman, when Badman and Bowles through their attack, there was some very clear understandings of this could be done and we'll do it. I felt the general response to Surley and since has been much more, I'm not sure what's going on. I don't know, it feels like people haven't been able to get hold of it as much as 10 years ago. And so I'd certainly encourage people to talk a lot more about what's happening. Obviously, this pandemic has brought in an unpredictable future. Even if they get schools back in January, say, if they get all the schools back in January, the education departments are going to have a lot of other things on their minds rather than taking forward home education stuff. But it may well come back up in the future, as we were saying earlier. Negative parent reaction plus positive parent reaction, it's going to amplify. So I think it is a good time for the home education community to start talking, and you can do it locally. Talk to one another about the politics. I know they're wearing, but we've got to understand the other side. While it's not English, it's not British, the recent spat over the Harvard magazine article has been really informative because it's brought out some of the underlying ideologies. The statement I highlighted in the presentation, that parents aren't parents naturally, they have parental responsibilities only because the state gives it to them, i.e. the state can withdraw that at any time. That's a very big ideological issue. And yet those people think they've got the human rights arguments on their side. So talk about it amongst yourselves as well. But that is one thing I would like to see. So if you know anybody who you think they ought to be involved in the conversation, put them in touch with Juliet, she'll put them in touch with me. Or if you know me directly, get in touch with me directly. That's the type of thing. And we'll try and get a wider conversation going. Anything else from anybody? I haven't stirred anybody into a response. Yes, Katie.
So is there scope for like a forum or a regular call or sort of something like this, maybe once a month, and, you know, sort of a focus for that conversation? Because I know there's things like the Facebook groups, but they all tend to go a bit crazy.
I think
we set something up that people can then kind of point to and join in on, that sort of, I don't know, a monthly briefing or whatever.
I certainly think that the arrival of Zoom and Skype, meet now in Skype, and this whole thing has opened up a new way of us being able to talk and at least see each other. It's an improvement on just voice. And yeah, I would think that if you don't want hundreds, but if there was people who are motivated, wanted to talk, say once a month, that would be a great idea. Somebody's got to take responsibility for facilitating it, making sure everybody knows it's happening. But if people wanted that, I would think that would be good as well. And you all know what your role is, whether you're a newbie home educator and you're still finding your feet, whether you're somebody who's been at it for years and feel that you can be putting in more in context, or somebody like us that's basically gone off the top end and have a bit more time around. We can have that type of conversation, and it would be good to hear from others across just the local areas. So yeah, if that would be good, I think we could do it using this type of format.
I'd like to chip in there too, Katie. I don't know if you've come across the HE Byte, which is a website that's been set up purely to disseminate information and keep people up to date. And I think that's a good place to start, with just being aware and of recent developments and things that are going on in the political situation. And I think, yeah, we need to find a way just to get people talking to each other and linking together. We don't have to all agree and be on the same page 100%, but we do need to be loud enough to have a louder voice than what we have right now. There's some a comment from Elizabeth. Where do we get to know what our rights are and where the boundary lies? And I think, Elizabeth, you shared earlier you'd had some issues yourself with your local authority. Am I right?
Yes.
Yeah. Do you want to say more, Elizabeth, or just say yes?
Yes, it's me. It's me.
Yeah. Right.
She was on in the earlier session. I think she gave a bit of a story in the earlier session today. Is that right? Was it that one?
Yes, that was the one.
Okay.
Right. Yeah. Well, Juliet's mentioned the HE Byte. There is on there various links to things like the human rights situation. Fiona Nicholson's site, Ed Yourself, is very good on a list of what the latest guidelines are in different areas. So that's edyourself.org. Julie's leaving us. Bye bye. Yeah, Fiona Nicholson's Ed Yourself website is very good. HE UK website. The stuff there, I don't find it as easy to navigate around as Fiona's, but it's there. So there's plenty, and we do link. Oh, they do link to them from the HE Byte, so you can find it there. That's the best thing. Yeah. And again, your local home educators should know where the local policy. Go onto your council website, look for their policy, just type in home education and see what comes up and compare it to what the government guidance says. Yeah. And of course, Juliet's head up.
Yeah, so Elizabeth, if you're needing more one-to-one support and you need to actually speak to somebody about a specific situation, I'm more than happy to talk to you on the phone and see if we can help and support you there.
Yeah.
That is 8 o'clock, Randall. So I don't know if you want to
I think with bedtimes coming up and a long thing, And I understand they played a trick on you. Not a trick, a nice little presentation earlier, Juliet. So I think we have to finish, as this is the last one, by saying well done to Juliet and the team for all their work on this. It's been a learning experience, and we'll see whether they prefer it to a one-day event next year.
Yeah, I think our lives have changed forever. That's it. Anyway, thank you everybody for joining us this evening. Please, come and chat to us still on the app while you can, or and make contact. We're loving this community of the conference, and would love to continue hearing from you. So take care and good night.
Thank you very much.
Good night.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Good night. Thank you, Randall and Mary. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.